Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health with Sarah Banta. I'm a wife, mom of 3, and an NANP certified supplement professional, but that's not all. I'm also the founder of the most innovative health supplement company, awarded 4 years in a row, Accelerated Health Products, a brand offering innovative, natural, scalar-enhanced supplements to optimize your health. And this podcast is not just a source of information. We're a community. We're all here to learn and grow on our health journeys, regardless of where you are today. And this podcast is the springboard to learning. The free group coaching on Telegram is where we continue learning together. You ask your questions. I post tips and tools to deepen your health to keep you motivated and moving forward. So here's what you can expect. New episodes every Monday and Wednesday with in-depth health discussions and expert guests. Hot topics that are in the news every Friday to keep things fun. And then, of course, followed up with the free group coaching on Telegram. And all of the details are on my website at sarahbantahealth.com. Have you thought about detoxing, but you are a little concerned about being put on a juice cleanse, no food, hangry, all of the detox flu symptoms? Well, I've created over 10 unique, easy detox cleanse programs to help you reset your body while feeling great, eating real food. You can start with the colon cleanse just to get pooping, the parasite or candida cleanse, bladder cleanse, the liver flush cleanse, which most people need at least 4 times a year, and then the big one, the accelerated diet cleanse that resets your hormones, your gut, your brain, that weight loss plateau. You can take my detox quiz at sarahbantahealth.com to find out which one's right for you. And maybe you're not ready for a detox, but you want to start with just 1, 2, maybe 3 supplements. You don't know what to start with. Just fill out the form on my website and I will personally put together a protocol for you. Just by taking a few steps forward with your health, you will change your life. And the difference is I am here every step of your journey. And today I'm super excited to have Dr. John Kim on. He's a dedicated functional medicine pharmacist with a passion for helping others to find the root causes for their health challenges, not just treating the symptoms. And after earning his doctorate in pharmacy from Rutgers University, he pursued further training in anti-aging and regenerative medicine to offer a more holistic approach to wellness. Dr. Kim, welcome. How are you today?
So thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, especially, we planned this out for a while, and I'm super excited to discuss all the topics of mold, detox, and many things related to cellular health. So
cellular health. I always say we are only as healthy as our cells, regardless. Yes, and the problem is today is we have so many threats that are just attacking our cellular health, and the doctors are just going after that one symptom you go in there for and not getting to the root cause. And so then you've got all of these side effects from the medications that they're put on, and it's just this vicious cycle. So I'm super excited because it seems that more people than ever are suffering from these symptoms of fatigue and mitochondrial failure, and mold is a big part of it. Parasites are a big part of it, the spike protein, how everything kind of plays together. So first, I want to dive into your story. Why? Why are you so passionate about mold? This is something that people think, oh, well, I don't live in a house full of mold. I don't need to worry about it. But tell us your story.
Yeah, why isn't a pharmacist just counting pills and then just be done with it? So my background, so I've been in pharmacy practice since 2006, and my background has been doing compounding pharmacy. And that was one of the passionate things that I got into pharmacy school for, because when I was interning at a pharmacy, they actually did compounding. And so making from capsules to creams to different dosage forms to help the client's needs, especially to customize the therapy, was some of the things that was very new, it was thrilling, but also was very different compared to just counting pills and counseling patients. So that's why I got into pharmacy school. However, when I end up having to go through my externship during my last year of my doctor of pharmacy degree, I was actually working in the ER, and one of the key things that really made a pinnacle moment for me in looking at the root cause issue was because one particular lady came in having to deal with an uncontrolled blood pressure and having to come in every single week because she had the same issue having her blood pressure not controlled well enough.
Mm.
Key issue that happens a lot in ER and even any hospital setting is to do what? Getting that patient out the door, right? There's nothing about counseling, no dietary changes, no stress management, to a point in terms of asking how her life is and such. And so the key thing that we were implementing there was something called maximizing pharmaceutical care. That means you get as much medication you can to lower that blood pressure and get them out the door. But guess what? It wasn't working, right? So this is the part that I was questioning, but that was not something that was welcomed in the hospital setting, nor did my preceptor. However, when you look at the JNC7 guideline that was published as like the hypertension Bible for clinicians to use, and the 7 version was back in 2005, 2006, the first thing they actually teach you at that particular guideline is to do what? Lifestyle change implementation. Mm. Nothing was something that was implemented in a hospital. And that became a pinnacle moment. I was like, you know what? This is not something that I signed up for. This is not something that I was taught. And we're doing completely opposite just for the sake of convenience. That's what it is, right? It's convenience in terms of clinicians working to get to the other patient and get them out the door. And that is it. So I end up working with some of the top functional medicine pharmacists at that point in time. It was just called the integrative. We didn't call it functional medicine. And that made to a point in terms of going through A4M, did my fellowship in functional medicine. And that went into working with clients dealing with hormone replacement issues, along with patients with urogynecological issues. I was consulting a lot of females dealing with vulvodynia or other pain issues that they were having discomfort with. But what really set the tone in terms of what I'm doing now, especially for mold toxicity, was because I had a heart attack at the age of 33 because of mold. I didn't even realize it was a mold issue until I had a massive heart attack and had to get a stent put in. And then after a week of just staring at a wall, wondering what happened, and then realizing there has to be something else going on. And I work with my integrative physician friend and colleague, and she looked at me. She's like, I think you're dealing with tick-borne illness. I'm like, there's no way. I mean, I never had a tick bite from a member growing up. So it took about a month and a half of results coming back, and I was tested positive for Bartonella, high levels of Aspergillus antibodies, Epstein-Barr, high levels of mercury, on top of dealing with Mycoplasma pneumoniae and parasites. So you had a lot of biotoxin and environmental toxins getting involved, and this is the result that came through. So how does that occur? Bartonella infection actually causes endothelial damage. So that already causes a blunt of trauma already happening there. Now, when you talk about mold issue, it actually causes more high levels of oxidative stress, also oxidizes fat. So you have atherosclerotic plaque buildup at a rapid rate for a person who's 33 years old. So I became the youngest patient to get a stent put in. You know, unfortunately, I didn't get an award, but I'm here to tell about it, talk about this story of what had happened and why, in any scenario dealing with your health issue, from working with a lot of complex cases and clients, mold has to be a discussion. It's not about the parasites. It's not about the next levels of heavy metals. In many cases, we're doing things way too early in certain chelation therapy, for instance, hurting the clients even more. It actually damages the cell membrane even further. And then the mitochondrial dysfunction becomes worse. So there's a step-by-step approach in terms of what to do, but we don't even address that. We just go right into addressing the problem. Well, what if I told you mold is a terrain, right? It's not about the microbiome. The terrain is the biggest question. And when the terrain's dirty, the parasites come together as well, right? So what are you trying to fix right now? You're just running a rat race, trying to give whatever it is it's going to stick on the wall. But many cases, when I see clients coming to me, I see that they are gone through so many protocols. They spent thousands of dollars in their supplements and seeing different practitioners, and then they're back to square one. I haven't gotten anything achieved. I'm sicker than ever, right? I'm lost. What can I do? And this is the part that I look at a bigger scenario of what's going on with this person, and really look at the eyes of the lens of the cell danger response scenario, right? There is a bigger role of not just about the microbiome, but also the terrain, the environment they're living in, nervous system dysfunction, cellular health is another thing, right? And then the last thing is, how do we rebuild that person's cellular resiliency so they could actually live and thrive, and they don't have to be stuck with supplements, right? So that's the part that I try to achieve, because listen, one of the things I joke around with my clients is, I don't want to ever see you after 6 months, right? You should not be hooked on supplements for 6 months. And that's also a trauma issue with some people, right? They're like, oh my God, I've been taking supplements for 1 full year. What do you mean I have to stop it?
It's this dependency. It's like food. We need food every day. We need our supplements every day. And so I really want to dive in. The first thing I want to touch on is, I talk a lot about stress and how stress affects the body. And when people think of stress, they think of, oh, my kids are stressing me out, the finances are stressing me out. But the internal stress your body is fighting when it has a mold issue or toxicity, that is a stress that is going to suppress your mitochondrial function, your thyroid function, and the wheels start coming off. What I want to first get into are, what are the symptoms that someone should look out for mold toxicity?
That's sometimes difficult, because it could just be simple respiratory issue. It could be just allergies alone, stuffy nose, nothing significant saying that is mold problem. And this is the reason why, when you go to a conventional doctor, for instance, or urgent care, they're going to just give you certain medication, or just say, see how it is, take this over-the-counter medication, come back. But what really sets the issue is that when you are chronically getting sick, and this is the part that it's a problem with mold toxicity, where when you think about certain things like atractocethins, which is a mold toxin coming from Stachybotrys, or that can cause massive amount of immune suppression, right? There's certain other toxins like mycophenolic acid, which is known to cause immunosuppression. And so when you are constantly having these type of endless amount of allergy issues, cold, a viral infection you cannot get rid of, upper respiratory issues chronically happening, maybe you are dealing with chronic UTI problem, right? So ochratoxin, for instance, and citrinins, those are top other mold toxins which can irritate the kidney, but also the bladder, mucosal tissue of the bladder, which results in you having a high propensity of having a chronic UTI problem. And then vulvodynia is another issue with females, right? Guys dealing with prostatitis issues, infertility problem, right? So you have a small issue in terms of thinking that nothing's happening, but then when you go deep into the symptoms the person's dealing with, you got to dig in. And this is where proper lab testing, especially doing a uromycotoxin, as well as looking at the organic acid panel, as well as looking at their lipid structure, of looking at red blood cell fatty acid analysis also, it shows that there's a deeper rooted problem of mitochondrial dysfunction, as well as there's many levels of environmental toxins or organic toxins like mold, which has resulted in the symptoms you're having at this point, right? So that's the reason why it becomes very difficult as well. Even let's talk about inflammation. Inflammation is caused by multiple things, right? If you eat something incorrectly, let's just say your insulin spikes, that could cause inflammation. If you slept incorrectly, that's going to cause inflammation as well. But when you are dealing with chronic inflammation, that also leads into your immune system being constantly fired. And this is where possibility of autoimmune issues, or having, again, the signs and issues of immunosuppression can actually occur, which can result in other manifestations like eczema, psoriasis, rheumatoid, MS, could be lupus. That could be also another levels of the issues as well. And there are studies showing that certain mold toxins are related to these autoimmune diseases as well. But when you go to a rheumatologist, they're not going to look at that. They end up having to look at how do we get your symptoms under control, and which is fair enough to say, because you are dealing with a danger issue, right? You got to get that pain under control. You got to get that immune system under control. But the next step you got to really think about is what's causing it, right?
Right.
Is it food related? And in many cases, it can be because when you have leaky gut and then causing endless amount of microinflammation or meta-inflammation, especially metabolic issues on top of inflammatory condition, leading into different cytokine activity and upbending problem. And then when you're adding in mold issues on top of environmental toxins and then having chronic state of these immune firing up, now you're leading into chronic inflammatory response syndrome, right? So multiple problems there. And then when you are seeing, again, this is very hard to predict, but this can also lead into mast cell activation issue as well, where you end up having to react to multiple things, including stress is a big problem. So why I mention all these different things and sometimes can be confusing is that it's so difficult to navigate this through that it's not just about the toxins. It's not about the supplements. It's about the environment. It's about the nervous system dysregulation issues, cell membrane and cellular problem on top of microbiome imbalance. And then how do we rebuild your resiliency so you do not react, right? So I have a program called the Encore method, where I actually lay out a roadmap for clients to relook at that this is a proper ways of navigating this through. It's not about the supplements. It's not about the binder either, right? It's about how do we navigate so this way we clean up the environment, you have to thrive, and then how do we regulate your nervous system correctly? Because when you are stressed, when you are dealing with chronic nervous system dysregulation, trauma issues and everything as well, that activates the microglial pathway in the brain, leading into additional levels of cytokine activity, inflammation, and also causing other issues in terms of vagal nerve response and your immune system being affected as well. So I look at a bigger lens in terms of trying to make a complex issue into a dial matter so this way we could navigate easily for clients.
Listening to all of it, someone could get really overwhelmed because it seems like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. And you mentioned histamine response. I've seen since the pandemic, histamine issues have skyrocketed. Epstein-Barr has skyrocketed. Parasites, all of these symptoms that you're talking about has skyrocketed. And it's like one thing makes the other worse, which makes the other worse, which makes the other worse. And they just play with each other. And then it's like I can go from feeling great to feeling awful really quick because all of these things are activated. And you mentioned the word terrain, that it's not just about the microbiome, but what do you mean? Can you explain what you mean by terrain?
So terrain is the way that your entirety body itself, from the cell membrane structure to allowing proper balance of the microbiome, as well as the interior organ system. And all in all, it actually comes all the way down to epigenetic issues as well. Because when you talk about certain toxins, it actually acts as a DNA adduct, which resulted in changing the genetic expression, and then you can actually have change in the functions of the organs and the tissues. So that becomes a terrain issue, leading into potentially being highly susceptible to mold toxins, for instance. I know you talked about especially with the issue that we have for the last 5 years in dealing with spike protein and SARS-CoV, and especially dealing with the mRNA vaccine. The spike protein already has shown that it can lead into CD34 stem cell reduction issues, right? Which can be showing of where either it could be natural or could be from the mRNA, resulted in weakening of the adaptive immune system, resulting in being much more vulnerable to mold on top of mast cell issues on top of that. And then you also have an impact on the gut microbiome as well. Right. There's certain studies in terms of Dr. Hazar actually had studied, massive studies showing that spike proteins decrease the bifidobacter level. So when you do that, you actually have a low levels of short chain fatty acid being produced, and especially the butyrate form, right, is what's really needed to actually help the gut lining intact, also the immune system, but also actually helps to protect the DNA. And then there's another issue related to the overall consequence that we have to go through for the last 5 years, that there is a Th1 and Th2 immune shifting that's actually happening, whereas a far more Th2 skewing going on, resulting in an increase in, like IL-4, IL-5, and other cytokine interleukins that could be fired up, which mold patients suffer much more in dealing with mycotoxin issues, right? And then they end up having to just pinpoint that this is a long haul issue. No, they are dealing with actual reactivation and the susceptibility issues from mold. So this is the part that's really missed. And unfortunately, I think it's gonna get better as it goes, but clinicians out there are not able to pinpoint this issue, that this is related to the terrain problem, the mold, and then the environmental issues, along with now we actually had SARS-CoV spike protein problem. Right? So there's multiple issues where the person is becoming much more vulnerable to everything.
And then how does mold play with the parasites and viral activity within the body? And it's kind of like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? The mold or the parasites or the heavy metal toxicity? Or is there a king in the playground?
So I used to think that it was all related to mold, or it's all related to parasites, and that there was a microbiome imbalance. More and more I should look at, and especially when I work with my clients in cleaning up the environment, I have to focus on artificial toxic light and as well as EMF exposure. The amount of EMF exposure on top of the toxic light exposure that's been going on since probably 56 years at this point in time. And there are government studies showing that EMF exposure actually changes and also hurts the mitochondrial function, and also dysregulates the sugar control response as well, glucose response. So everything related to metabolic issues in terms of making the cell membrane much more susceptible to toxins and such are related to that. Now you're overwhelming the system with these different types of electromagnetic frequency and light and such. Now you're actually having bigger susceptibility issue, again, related to mold. And then that also changed the terrain, which parasites end up to stay a lot longer. And then parasites also harbor Lyme, mold, and heavy metals at the same time, right? So that's another play of it. And so just tackling the parasite problem, it doesn't fix the problem. Just because you tackle the heavy metal, and I've seen clients coming in, they're like, I spent $15,000 in chelation therapy. Nothing seemed to do anything except for I feel even worse. Why? Because you damage the cell membrane, right? Even I know Dr. Shoemaker, for instance, he revolutionized in terms of teaching all the clinicians how to look at cell membrane. I mean, mold toxicity very differently, and including the explanation of SIRS. But the use of cholestyramine, for instance, use of biosecretion binders, it actually damages the cell membrane. It actually binds to the phospholipids. It actually damages the gut lining, right? It actually renders the mitochondria even worse scenario. And so clients end up having to go on a long-term cholestyramine therapy, for instance, for mold. And cholestyramine has only been really shown to be effective against ochratoxins anyway, based on the studies. You damage the person's mitochondrial function even greater. And so what are we trying to fix? You got to look at much bigger lens in terms of how is the cellular function actually happening? How is the overall structure of the cell membrane and the bilateral structure, as well as reversing lipid peroxidation issues, right? Including ways to decrease phospholipase A2 enzyme, which can literally ligate the phospholipid bilateral structure. But cortisol and sugar, those are two things can actually activate that enzyme as well, right? So there's multiple things happening. That's the reason why it's so difficult to navigate this, because unless you really look at this in a bigger lens and not just doing that, but just hyper-focus on a problem, you're missing the entire thing.
Right. So you talk a lot about phosphatidylcholine as far as the cell membrane. And I always say, you're only as healthy as your cell, and that cell membrane is the brain of the cells, letting the toxins out and nutrients in. Can you talk about phosphatidylcholine's role in the detoxing from mold and all of the other things?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're looking at your cells, especially the cell in itself is not just a single layer, it's a bilayeral structure. So you actually have phospholipid structure, which is on top. So there's phospholipid complex, which deals with phosphocholine, phosphoserine, phosphoinositol, and phosphoethanolamine. So these are four things that end up having to make the phospholipid complex. And then the inner lining of it is comprised of alpha linolenic and linoleic. So it's comprised of omega-6, omega-3, and a 4:1 ratio. Right? So everybody's like, omega-6 is bad. No, you need omega-6. It actually provides a structural integrity as well as the stiffness in many cases to help with this entire thing. Along with other things like stearic acid as well, oleic. So these are all other fatty acids getting involved. So long story short, so cell membrane is comprised of I got to get this straight. Sometimes it makes it a lot more difficult for people to understand. So let me just slow down my explanation. So cell membrane comprised of a mixture of fats related to cholesterol, could be sphingolipids, phospholipids I mentioned about, and then different embedded proteins. And healthy cell membrane is supposed to be very pliable. Actually has a different mixtures of this fatty acid getting involved, is allowing nutrients to come in and then waste to go out. And this is a natural part. It also has receptors as well, right? Along with proton pumps and then as well as sodium pumps getting involved. So these are all part of the entire thing. Unfortunately, in a unhealthy cell membrane, there is a fatty acid deficiency, and there's a low levels of sphingolipids because of the damage that goes on. And then there's also denatured omega-6 as well, right? And then this is an effect of the oxidative damage during the cell danger response issue. So if anyone out there not knowing what cell danger response is, it's basically a evolutionary metabolic changes that goes on within the mitochondria and the cell function to explain about a disease states as well as a healing matter. And this was a theory that was put out by Dr. Robert Naviaux. He's a MD, PhD out of UC Davis. He was trying to really explain about the disease states of autism spectrum and why we need to look at this in a more metabolic ways to measure, but also ways to actually allowing proper ways for the mitochondria to revert back, and as well as navigating that through specifically to a healing mode. Because if you have an improper healing mechanism, this is where chronic disease end up having to occur. So this is a part that Dr. Robert Naviaux, and especially in his metabolic lab, was able to explain this through. But you could also, based on his theory, it actually really shows what's happening within the cells as well, right? So for instance, like healing is really determined by the health of your cell membrane. Just as what I mentioned, this is exactly what I teach as well. So cell membrane controls the nutrient exchange I mentioned before, signaling transduction on top of structural integrity, which is essential for cell to be resilient. And the impact of the cell danger response issue is that and especially when you're getting prolonged cell danger response activation, it actually leads into compromised cell membrane, contributing to chronic inflammation as well as mitochondrial dysfunction. So what the goal of utilizing phospholipid replacement therapy is to reverse this and allowing proper ways to getting the cell membrane back in order, basically. So let's take mold issue, for instance, right? Under the cell danger response theory, when you are triggered by this particular toxin, the cells end up having to pump out phospholipids within the cells to lock things in. Why? It's not preventing other toxins from going out and then damaging it further. So this actually resulted in an increase in saturation of the phospholipids, leading into poor membrane fluidity, right? And then on top of there's lack of cell-to-cell communication going on. On top of that, mitochondria, this is what the mitochondria does. Mitochondria not only making energy, it actually shuts it down, but also it acts as to as a defense mode to fight off this particular toxin in there, right? So there's a lot of things going on which can result in them causing mitochondrial dysfunction, right? Even methylation process is dictated by the mitochondria as well. But the early onset of cell danger response, especially innate immune response happening, the mitochondria shuts the methylation down. Why? It prevents further oxidative phosphorylation and damage that goes on within the cell, so the space is able to retain the function of it and then allowing proper cells to function. So this is what the entirety of what the mitochondria are trying to do, because when you are dealing with mold toxins, for instance, it actually increases oxidative stress and lipid peroxidation. Lipid peroxidation is basically reactive oxygen species attacking unsaturated fatty acid in the phospholipid bilateral structure, forming lipid peroxides, basically damaging that sense of it. And that in itself, and when you fail to maintain that damage and fixing it, leads into further degradation of ion exchanges, for instance, or signaling within the cells, and then also its barrier function also gets damaged as well. And the problem is environmental toxins, infections, and inflammatory signals further exacerbate this particular problem. And then when you are dealing with this also resulted in disrupting of membrane fluidity as well. I mentioned about how membrane is supposed to be fluid. It's not happening there. And it leads into further problem with mitochondrial dysfunction, and especially when you're talking about like cardiolipin, which is a unique phospholipid within the inner membrane, is much more susceptible to these different toxins, resulting in increasing reactive oxygen species forming. And then there's also pro-inflammatory issue as well, contributing to further lipid breakdown. I mentioned about how chronic issue dealing with insulin response as well as cortisol, leading into phospholipase or PLA2, which is an enzyme that degrades the cell membrane. It becomes a problem. And then as well as the membrane immune surveillance, which is a really fascinating thing where if there's a damaged section of the cell membrane, the cells end up having to turn that inside out to allow immune cells to recognize that damage and go after it. Mm. But this actually leads into further damage in the cell membrane because the immune system is like, wait a minute, I can't tell which is what, so let's go everything. So it's another problem at the same time, leading into also glycation is another problem, depletion of antioxidants, and then on top of endoplasmic reticulum stress, right? So there's an improper protein folding resulted in cellular expression being incorrect at the same time. So all these things becomes a problem. So the goal of utilizing phospholipid therapy, I call it the lipid membrane stability therapy, right? The goal is to restoring the actual cell membrane integrity and fluidity back, so this way is able to properly function, able to help you detox correctly, because you need to have a proper membrane function to detox. It's not about the binders here, right? You need to have a proper forming membrane to allow you to detox, and cellular function can actually occur. And this is where reestablishing the mitochondrial function is so important, because you need to respect the role of the mitochondria, right? I'll give you a perfect example. Giving clients methylated B vitamins at an incorrect time can actually cause the problem to get worse. Mm-hmm. Because what do we talk about? The mitochondria shuts the methylation down to prevent the further damage from occurring. Now you're just basically turning it back on by giving methylated B vitamins. So instead of actually focus on that, we need to focus on what the mitochondria is trying to do. And if you look at the entirety of the process, the lens of the cell danger response that Dr. Robert Navio is really teaching, it teaches clinicians to really navigate this through methodically and allowing clients to get to the overall recovery process they're looking for. As well as this supports the detox pathway, enhances cellular function, and other fatty acid as well. Like butyrate is a beautiful, beautiful thing to add in. It's not just about the supporting the gut. Butyrate, especially sodium butyrate, and as well sodium phenylbutyrate, the studies have shown, it actually acts as a chemical chaperone. Comes in, cleaves up the toxins away from the DNA and the cell membrane, and so it's allowing proper fixing of the cell membrane. And then the phospholipids are coming in there to mend the cell membrane at the same time. It sweeps away the toxins away. And then when you are utilizing different biosalts, like TUDCA, for instance, it actually helps to remend that cell membrane properly. So it's a natural part that we're trying to respect for the mitochondria to allow that to occur by supplementing it in a correct fashion. And it's a beautiful thing that is really designed that, one of the companies that I work with a lot, and I always say I owe my life to them, was because, for instance, the company is called Body Bio. Right? Yeah. The reason I actually mentioned about them, and especially I say they saved my life, was after my heart attack, the first thing my doctor put me was on their liposomal PC.
Right? I take it daily.
Yeah. So that phospholipid PC, liposomal PC, was one of the key thing that was added on my recovery process. And I also did IVPC to really help to increase that detox and cellular issue that I was dealing with because of mold toxins on top of Bartonella infection. So that really was the integral thing. But one of the things that helped out a lot was my red blood cell fatty acid results was sent to Dr. Ed Kane, and he analyzed it. And then after that, the entire protocol was based on his input. So, that's the main reason why I actually work with them a lot. Main reason why I choose their supplements. Also, when you buy a cheap phospholipid supplements out there, it's made of a sunflower lecithin, and it's powder form, and it doesn't get absorbed very well. How do you know that? When you take a powder form and you mix it in water, it becomes a big clump. You're not getting absorption to that. A true liposomal PC, even though it's expensive, once you mix it in water, is able to get into a solution very quickly, and it's very even process the cell is able to take in. There's a big difference in terms of cheap PC and a correct PC.
Yeah. Well, I take it daily, and when I started taking it, it was almost like my body craved it and was saying, I love this. I know it's energizing my cells. I could feel it. And I like to pair it with iodine because of that iodolipid value on the cell membrane as well to make it more fluid. And I know you talk about iodine and you talk about methylene blue for mitochondrial health. Can you explain how those two things are very supportive for mitochondrial health?
Sure. I mean, methylene blue has been utilized in medicine for a long period of time. Especially now, I think the recent 2025 is now picking up some paces because RFK decided to take a methylene blue in the airplane. And the entire media is like, what is he taking? Why is it blue? Right? So methylene blue is a particular medicine, if you want to call it, which actually helps to act as a deliverance of electron carriers and helps to really get the mitochondrial electron transport chain activated. It works into enhancing ATP production as well. It also acts as a potent antioxidant and reducing oxidative stress. So I mentioned about oxidative stress and dealing with mold toxins. Certainly, methylene blue can be helpful. Now, phospholipids, for instance, I mentioned about how it actually helps to enhance the repair and maintaining the cell membrane, including the mitochondrial function. So how these two agents end up to put in together is that methylene blue act to making energy more effective, while phospholipid is there to really get the electron transport chain fixed and allowing proper membrane to be functioning. Also, these two agents actually act as antioxidants and then anti-inflammatory synergistic effect, where methylene blue scavenges as a free radical by reducing mitochondrial oxidative stress. And then when you're taking PC, for instance, act to repair the damages that went on from the oxidative stress. It's like almost like a 1-2 knockout punch, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a part that could be helpful, as well as there's a neuroprotective effect from the methylene blue, as well as the phospholipids are very protective for the brain as well, especially getting the blood-brain barrier fixed. So it's very powerful agents to add in. This is something that I would suggest doing. Anyone out there that's going to be starting it out, take it very, very slowly. Mm-hmm. Because if you start out at a whopping dose too quickly, you're cranking a process that's been already in a dysfunctional state, and trying to crank that, you could have massive of a Hertz reaction.
Interesting. So what is the dosage that you recommend?
I mean, it really depends on a person. I don't have a particular dose, but usually when you talk about methylene blue of 5 milligrams up to 10 milligrams is a good way to support the mitochondrial function and energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And cognitive function. When you're talking about a mitochondrial dysfunction from Lyme or mold issues, clients could be taking between 15 to about 25 to 50 milligrams.
Mm.
And then when you're dealing with Lyme disease, for instance, I never really recommended before, but I know certain other Lyme physicians, they end up having to recommend it. It could be running around like 150 to 300 milligrams at a time, right? So it's a very high dose because methylene blue does have an antimicrobial effect as well. So many reasons why some people do feel like they're having a die-off reaction. So anyone out there never felt die-off reaction? Die-off reaction could feel like you're having a flu, basically.
Right.
You're bedridden for days, feeling lousy, and then when you actually have a poor detox pathway, especially your liver's not protected right correctly, as well as your bowel's not forming well, and you're not pooping well to begin with. Now you're just backing everything up, and that's not where you want to start. So
Yeah.
things to really focus on, I usually recommend people to do. Let's get your entire drainage pathway supported while you're supporting the cell membrane, because if the piping system is completely blocked, you're not getting things out.
Right. I always say you got to clean out the bottom pipes before you clean out the upper pipes.
Yeah. So like we mentioned about constipation, for instance, I don't recommend any clients to do any type of detox until their bowel is moving, right?
1,000%. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So with all of this complication and everyone's head spinning right now going, I don't even know where to start. Where do you start people on their detoxification with mold? You mentioned the nervous system. And then obviously we talked a lot about the mitochondrial health. So do you just start them on the supplements to help with their mitochondrial health first? Where does diet come in? Where are you taking someone through this process?
Sure. I mean, it is a long process, obviously, and sometimes can be very overwhelming when you have never done any type of elimination diet to begin with. But the first thing that we really have to teach the client is how to navigate the nervous system. I mean, I'm like, what? I mean, you're not starting any supplements? No, you want to regulate the nervous system first. The reason is if they're constantly reacting to other things around them and they don't know how to take care of their own nervous system properly, that could be a problem. So one thing that I teach clients in the way beginning is to teach them about heart coherency breathing, right? The heart in itself, right, it's not just a pumping mechanism or just a big piece of muscle. It actually is able to have 40 different thousand nerves going into the heart, is able to sense different experiences much greater than the brain. Matter of fact, the brain sends more information from, the heart sends more information from the heart to the brain itself. So brain is able to feel. It actually has its own intuition. Also, it actually has ways to get information from your environment as well. So when you're dealing with trauma, stress response, things are reacting you, things you're not familiar with, things you're not comfortable with, right? These are going to really make a major impact in your nervous system dysfunction. On top of I mentioned about how cortisol can be a big problem in dealing with your cell membrane health. That's something that we're going to have to teach you how to regulate normally, right? If you're not resting well, if you don't know how to turn your brain off, if you're constantly in fight or flight state mode, it's not going to work. And especially when you're trying to heal and recover, you have to be in that digest rest mode. And that's the part that I teach clients right off the bat, how to do heart coherency breathing technique. If anyone out there heard of heart math, that's exactly what it is, right? You're thinking about, you're focusing your brain into what you're making you happy, joyful, and grateful about. By just instantaneously thinking about those three things, you're changing the entire pattern of your brain, right? And it goes into alpha state. That also affects how your heart is. So that in itself creates something called a heart coherency. While you're achieving that, now you're doing a breathing technique. 5 seconds inhale through the nose and 5 to 7 seconds exhaling out through the mouth. And you should be doing that about 5 to 10 minutes. If you could do that even longer to 20 to 30, even greater in terms of the impact you're going to be making. But one thing for sure, your resting heart rate is going to go down. Why? You're in that restful state. And I've had clients where that are resting heart rate of 80 to 90 after doing this for about 4 to 6 weeks. their resting heart rate is around 60 to 70. They're not really pondering about the stress that they're dealing with. They're not really pondering about the illness that they're dealing with. Why? Because they're in a better state of mind. While we're doing that, oh, go ahead, sir.
I was just going to say, when you're focused on your breath, you can't let your mind spin and worry about all of the other things in your life, right?
Yeah.
It's almost, instead of a meditation, because a lot of people say, well, I can't meditate. My brain doesn't stop. But when you're focused on breath, it's giving you something to focus on and direct that attention to, away from the other stressors in your life.
Yes, absolutely. And you're focusing on what's making you happy, joyful, and grateful about, right? We have so many things to be grateful about. Vitamin G, basically, right? You have to be grateful. That's the part that you have to start out. It sets a huge, huge difference in terms of how your cellular function is happening as well. So if anyone out there that have not read Dr. Bruce Lipton's book, that's something I would highly recommend picking up. The way that you think about it changes your cellular health. Right? So that's a really important part that, see, I didn't even talk about anything about supplements here, right?
Right.
That's what it is. And the second part that we focus on your environment. How do we get your environment cleaned up? So if it's related to mold issue, then obviously since you're going to have to hire a testing company and have plans to remediate the environment, but other things in terms of toxic light, LED light bulbs, right? If you could change that to incandescent light bulbs, if not, wearing blue light blocking glasses, that could be, orange lens that I have right now, if not red. The companies that I like to work with is EMR Tech. They make one of the best glasses out there. I've tried other ones, but I love their lens quality, as well as Wi-Fi. You need to turn off all EMF if possible, especially in your bedroom. You need to get all the electronics out and allowing you to rest, because the EMF exposure, it actually affects basically vibrating your entire nervous system. So you want to get that cleaned up as much as you can. In certain cases, I would even recommend turning your cell phone off. Putting the cell phone on an airplane mode does not do enough. It's still transmitting data. So I recommend either putting into a Faraday bag, if not, turn your cell phone off completely, get your electronics away from your head and your bed, and allowing to rest properly. And then the next part you also have to really focus on is circadian rhythm. So circadian, especially sleep and melatonin production, all starts from the morning, not the night. So you want to wake up during the daybreak, going outside when the sun is just start to peak. That's when you're able to get that blue light exposure and the infrared from the sun, able to regulate your circadian rhythm, right? As well as to regulate that melatonin properly. And then you go throughout the day, make sure you get enough sunlight during the day as well, about 15 to 20 minutes. Peak time should be around 10 to 3 o'clock. You should get that vitamin D. That's going to be really helpful as well. Sun does not just help us make vitamin D. There's multiple other things to actually help with our cellular health as well, right? So that's one thing that I would recommend. And then for other clients who are very sensitive, I even recommend them to stay in the darkness for about 2 to 3 hours, right, before they go to sleep. Maybe getting small red light bulbs to replace around the house, but allowing them to calm their nervous system. But it does take about at least 2 to 3 months to see a big difference. But one thing you start noticing is that you're getting better sleep, you're getting better energy, and you become less reactive to all the symptoms you're dealing with. So while we incorporate all these things, then we start to getting their dietary issue fixed. So one of the things that I recommend people to do is more of a seasonal paleo-based diet, getting rid of gluten, casein, oxalates, nightshades, right? Because those all can cause inflammation, as well as all sugar, right? You want to keep your sugar stable as you can. High protein intake, around at least 1 gram of protein per pound, ideal body weight, that is. And as well as getting healthy fat intake in there, right? So BodyBio's PC and balanced oil is one thing, but other healthy fats, for instance, such as ghee, grass-fed butter, for instance, those can be very helpful. Organ meats are great ways to replacing stearic acid. So these are all different things that you have to place in. And then when I say seasonal, right, you're not going to be eating banana in the middle of winter. That's basically it. You need to eat something more local based on where you are, because the more local in terms of where you get your produce, that's exactly what the sun is imprinting in that particular plant, basically, or food that you're getting. And that's what's going to be really helpful for you. So you're not going to be eating any tropical fruits or things of that nature when you're living all the way up northeast in the middle of winter, right? That doesn't really fit into practice. You're going to be eating a lot more animal protein. And then as the weather gets warmer, right, especially in the summer, eat that watermelon, right? Enjoy it. That's what you're supposed to be doing. And so that's the part that I really do. And then things would be the cellular health. And then based on the test results, focusing on which antimicrobials to use in herbal ways, herbal setting that we do. And then really building up their cellular resiliency. So that's in a nutshell. Sorry, it went a little too longer than I expected.
No, so I love this because you are speaking to the choir. I talk about oxalates, I talk about wild animal protein, and eating whole, real food. Obviously, it's just a no-brainer. Stay away from the processed foods. I'm laughing because my daughters do the marketing for our house. And in the middle of the winter, I'll ask them, hey, get me a watermelon. And they'll roll their eyes at me and go, Mom, watermelon's not in season. You're not supposed to be eating it right now. And it's right. It's true. But the other thing I wanted to mention to emphasize what you were saying about circadian rhythm, the days where I go to the gym or work out in my garage without going outside versus the mornings when I start my morning with walking or running the dogs outside is night and day as far as my energy, my vision, the way my brain is working, and it carries me through the rest of the day. But by being out in that morning sunlight and then getting that vitamin D and going to bed at a reasonable hour and getting the circadian rhythm, that is the biggest tool, and it's free, right? It doesn't cost anything. That is number one, because it is regulating that nervous system and helping with the stress level. So, and wild animal protein. I mean, I just had my venison for lunch and it was delicious, and it's the ancestral blend. So it gets all the organ meats in there as well. And I feel so much better when I eat like that versus eating another way. So I echo everything you're saying, and I love this. And you are just a wealth of knowledge. I could sit here for hours with you. I mean, we might have to have you back and talk about hormones and what the medications have been doing to us, and just this crazy toxic world that we're in and how to navigate it. The sad thing is that all of the tips that you just gave should be just normal life. But we have been removed from nature. We've been removed from our natural rhythms of life. And with the EMFs and sleeping with our cell phone to be our alarm at night, that's not normal. That's not what our ancestors did. And we don't even know that it's not normal because we don't know any different. So it's just life's just become so confusing for people today. And now they're sicker than ever, and they don't know where to start. And that's why they need to work with you. So tell people where they can find you and follow you and work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. One last thing I forgot to mention, methylation, especially detoxing heavy metals, can be hindered by blue light exposure. Right. So there's a powerful thing in terms of what light is doing. And I didn't realize how much of an impact it was in terms of artificial light, EMF. And I was always focusing on the supplement and then just really focusing on cellular health. Well, cellular health has to start from the sunlight and the light exposure anyway. And that's a part that it took me a while to realize. And clients are doing much better without that much supplements anymore, right? Because you're now getting on the actual rhythm in terms of what the nature is intended.
Yes.
So anyways, but thank you so much for letting me be here. So if people want to follow me, I'll be on Instagram. My Instagram handle is john.farmd, PHARMD. My website is kimwellness.co, and you could also book a consultation as well there. But I'm also going to give a special landing page for your listeners to learn about cellular health. And I also have a discounted Conquer the Mold Toxicity course for your listeners as well. So that will be shared before this is aired.
Wonderful. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your knowledge, and I can't wait for our next conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an honor.
Oh my goodness, if you're like me, you might have to go back and listen again because there were so many good nuggets. And I want to just emphasize a few of the things. Sleep, getting that morning sunlight, getting protected from those EMFs, and knowing that some of your symptoms aren't just that layer where you have to attack the symptom, but you got to get down into the root cause. And mitochondrial cellular health. We're only as healthy as our cells. And the phosphatidylcholine he's talking about, the body bio PC, helps support that cell membrane, and that cell membrane has an iodolipid value, iodine lipid. So iodine and the PC together are supporting that cell membrane to let the toxins out and the nutrients in. And I want to just mention acceleradine iodine. It is the only monoatomic scalar enhanced form of iodine, which means it's the most bioavailable for all cells in the body. It detoxes the toxic halogens, the heavy metals that build up in the body. It kills pathogens, mold spores, candida bacteria, parasites, viruses. It supports that mitochondrial function. So it increases that ATP to the maximum level. The number one cause for mitochondrial failure, iodine deficiency. And 96% of the United States is iodine deficient. It also helps with thyroid function. Mold attacks and slows down your thyroid. So you might be having that unexplained weight gain, the hair falling out, just fatigued, and it might be due to that mold, which is affecting your thyroid. And iodine helps with the thyroid function more effectively than any other medication, anything else. He also mentioned methylene blue. It is so helpful for ATP, mitochondrial health, helping that electron transport chain so that the cells can communicate. So that wireless, when you're on your cell phone, you don't sound like you're under a tunnel. You have a good signal between the cells. So accelerated methylene blue is extremely helpful. It's also anti-parasitic, anti-pathogenic. So it's helping your immune system as well. Now, we talked a little bit about our liver. Our livers cannot detox all of this stuff if it's clogged. And he mentioned TUDCA. One of the main ingredients in accelerated liver care is TUDCA. Accelerated liver care has 13 rare herbs that work synergistically to detox and regenerate the liver. It supports bile flow, which is crucial for flushing out the fat soluble mycotoxins, regenerates the liver cells, balances your hormones, reduces inflammation and oxidative stress. It's super important for that cellular health as well. And lastly, that accelerated cellular detox powder to help soak up all those toxins and carry them out through your body. He mentioned pooping. It helps with the bowel movements as well and balances those out. So those are just a few of the supplements which help. Now, like he mentioned, you got to start with the sleep, the circadian rhythms, the movement, the sunlight, the diet, eating appropriately, getting rid of the processed foods. All of those things are paramount, right? Way more important than supplements, but the supplements then add and supplement your protocol. So thanks for listening. Our discussion does not have to stop here. If you're feeling lost in the supplement world, no worries. I'm here to help. You can start by getting your free supplement protocol. Head to sarahbanthealth.com. Fill out the form, and I will personally put together a protocol for you. Follow me on social media at Accelerated Health Products and join the free group coaching. It's on Telegram. You ask your questions. I post tips and tools every day. And you can find this podcast, Accelerated Health with Sarah Bant, on Spotify, YouTube, E360, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Roku, and over 100 different platforms. Share this podcast with your friends. Your friends are suffering. Their hair's falling out. They're fatigued. They have no idea where their symptoms are coming from. Share this, and this might be the key that helps them out. You can use coupon podcast10 to get 10% off your first order. Remember, I'm live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so join me next time for more ways to unlock your health potential.